Welcome to the Big Sky Astrology Podcast with your host, astrologer and author, April Elliott Kent.
Hello, invisible friend. April here, and the date today is August 11th, 2025. Welcome to episode 303 of the Big Sky Astrology Podcast. This week, Mercury turns direct and has not one, but two sextile opportunities with Mars. Saturn makes the second of three sextiles to Uranus, and Venus and Jupiter make a delicious conjunction in Cancer. The Taurus Last Quarter Moon is time to make some final decisions on those Leo new moon wishes, and I answer a listener question about the Midheaven in the whole sign house system. Mercury stations direct on Monday, August 11th at 12:30 a.m. Pacific Time at 4 degrees 14 minutes Leo. It began its retrograde back on July 17th. It just seems like yesterday, doesn't it? At 15 degrees Leo. And while Mercury moving forward again is pretty much welcome news, some astrologers feel that the retrograde effect lingers through what's called the shadow period. That started back on June 29th, when Mercury first crossed the degree it would eventually retrograde back to. And it won't be completely out of the woods in terms of the shadow period until August 25th, when it crosses the degree where it turned retrograde. So while communication and travel may start to smooth out now, it's probably a good idea not to let your guard completely down just yet, especially on the day that Mercury is actually standing still. Planets tend to shout a little louder when they are making their station. In other words, coming to a halt before they turn retrograde or direct. So you might find Mercury themes like news, messages, transportation, and even technology glitches act up a little bit more on this date. Mercury also rules merchants and trade. So this can be a day when something shifts in your business or financial matters. Mercury turns direct on the Sabian symbol 5 Leo, rock formations at the edge of a precipice. It speaks to gaining perspective, stepping back from our immediate problems to see how tiny they are against the backdrop of nature and time. It can be a humbling reminder to take the long view. And I actually like that these rock formations are at the edge of a precipice. They can keep us from falling over the edge. Also, on Monday, August 11th at 8:33 p.m. Pacific Time, Saturn sextiles Uranus at 1 degree 12 minutes Aries and Gemini. This is the second of three sextiles that Saturn will make to Uranus. The first was back on April 4th, and the final one in the series comes in January of next year. These are two planets that don't always get along very smoothly. Saturn is a rule maker, Uranus is a rule breaker. So anytime we see them working in harmony like they are here, it's worth paying attention. It can actually be a really exhilarating transit, especially if you've been putting in the kind of work that Saturn wants us to put in, staying committed to goals, building something solid, taking responsibility for your choices. Saturn often symbolizes our deepest fears, especially fear of failure. But Uranus invites us to imagine what life could be like without all of those fears running the show. So here's an opportunity to liberate ourselves from Saturn. And often these are rules you didn't even realize that you were imposing on yourself. Uranus doesn't just break chains. It points the way forward. Even if that sense of freedom that you get this week fades a little bit after the transit passes, it still can leave you changed. Once your eyes have been opened, they cannot unsee, and you realize you've had the keys to get yourself out of prison all along. Venus makes a conjunction with Jupiter on Monday, August 11th at 10:30 p.m. Pacific Time at 14 degrees 3 minutes Cancer. It's a beautiful merging of the two planets that are traditionally considered benefics or bringers of fortune. And so this is a moment that resonates with pleasure, generosity, and satisfaction. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, which means it's especially strong here. And the Sabian symbol for this degree couldn't be more perfect. 15 Cancer, a group of people who have overeaten and enjoyed it. And since Cancer is associated with the stomach and how we hold things there and how we prepare them for digestion, this image is appropriate both symbolically and literally. It is an indulgent and comforting moment of enjoying the good things in life. This transit can bring you more of what truly brings you joy. At first, you might just become more aware of what's been missing, of the ways you're not allowing yourself to enjoy what you already have. But this awareness is part of the healing process. Venus and Jupiter together remind us that feeling good isn't about overdoing it necessarily. It's about finding the right balance. What makes you really happy? What fills you up? Not just in the moment, but in a lasting, soul-nourishing way. I think this would be a fantastic day to invite friends to get together for dinner. We have something a little bit special and unusual this week, which is that Mercury will make two separate sextile aspects to Mars. The first is on Thursday, August 14th at 7:05 p.m. Pacific Time at 5 degrees 5 minutes Leo and Libra. And then it makes the second sextile on Sunday, August 17th at 10:33 p.m. Pacific Time at 7 degrees 4 minutes Leo and Libra. So what happens is Mercury turns direct on the 11th, and it's just kind of getting up to speed. It makes that sextile to Mars because it moves a bit faster than Mars, but it's not moving as quickly as it normally does. So it tracks along very close to a sextile with Mars between August 14th and then August 17th at 10:33. And you can watch it in my software. I can move it forward, getting closer. And then finally it makes that second sextile. It's kind of unusual. Well, this transit can really pack a lot of energy for communication and action. It brings together Mercury's very sharp mind with Mars's drive and energy. And having it happen twice is interesting because what we might find is a conversation that was left uncompleted, perhaps on the 14th, can end up getting finished on the 17th. Or likewise, a project that you started on the 14th might be finished closer to the 17th. And just know that between the 14th and 17th, we have got this situation where our mind and our actions are not completely synchronized. This is a time when your mind could be working overtime because Mars is so energetic. And it's kind of a good week for digging into especially writing projects or study. But be prepared because there could be some arguments and heated debates. Mercury is in Leo, which can get a little loud and a little dramatic. And Mars in Libra is a little more diplomatic, but it's still Mars. So having these two together could mean that you need to practice using your indoor voice when arguments start to get heated. The first pass, the first sextile aspect, happens under the Taurus moon and will probably be a little more steady, a little more methodical. But then by the time we have that second sextile on the 17th, when the moon is in Gemini, this energy intensifies and scatters, becomes more volatile, a little more quick moving. If you handled the earlier transit well on the 14th, you're positioned pretty well for the second one. Just mind your words, channel any anger or frustration constructively. In short, these Mercury-Mars sextiles bring sharp and energized and possibly focused communication, but also opportunities to fight on the behalf of causes that are important to you, such as justice and equality. And now it's time for the moon report. And as always, we begin with the week's major lunation, which is the last quarter moon in Taurus on Friday, August 15th at 10:12 p.m. Pacific Time, with the moon at 23 degrees 36 minutes Taurus and the sun in Leo at that same degree. This is a powerful moment in the lunar cycle. It's the last action point following the previous new moon, which was the Leo new moon on July 24th. So here is our moment to make decisions, to clear the decks, and to bring something from that new moon into a tangible form. The last quarter moon comes with some backup. The moon is exalted in Taurus. That gives it extra grounding and influence. And Taurus is ruled by Venus, which is just coming off that beautiful conjunction with Jupiter in Cancer. Meanwhile, the sun is at home in Leo. It's shining with confidence. And those Mercury-Mars sextiles are humming in the background, keeping communication sharp. So this is a terrific last quarter moon to take concrete steps toward your goals, whether that means making some important purchase, finalizing a decision, or just moving forward with something that has real-world significance. The moon in Taurus acts like a sensible friend, one who may not be cheering you on in your most glamorous dreams, but helps you make wise, grounded choices that you will feel good about in the long run. So at this last quarter moon, take stock, focus on what matters, and use this time to bring something meaningful into reality. This is the last quarter in a lunar phase family cycle that began on May 19th, 2023 at 28 degrees 25 minutes Taurus. In the lunar phase family cycle, the degree of each new moon is moved forward at 9-month intervals over a 3-year period, giving us plenty of time to realize something significant related to that new moon. The first quarter in this lunar phase cycle came on February 16th, 2024 at 27 degrees 25 minutes Taurus. So in particular, if there is an important planet in your chart, the sun, the moon, the ascendant, the midheaven, near that new moon degree, 28 degrees 25 Taurus, this first quarter in February 2024 will have given the motivation and the opportunity to make some kind of move in the direction of what you put out as an intention at that new moon. The full moon in this cycle was 9 months later on November 15th, 2024. That was at 24 degrees Taurus. And that was a moment when everything is revealed. We begin to see what we actually set into motion at that new moon in 2023. And now we're at the last quarter. And this is our final opportunity, as last quarters always are, to do a kind of a completion or a summing up of what this whole lunar phase family cycle has been about. And maybe this is a good moment to sit down and journal about this time period since May 2023, especially as it relates to the area of your chart that has 28 degrees, 25 minutes of Taurus in it. Let's look at the void of course moon periods for this week. The first one began last week on Sunday, August 10th, when the moon made a trine to Jupiter at 11:55 p.m. Pacific time and was void of course for 1 day, 3 hours and 38 minutes, entering Aries this week on Tuesday, August 12th at 3:33 a.m. The moon is what brings us comfort. Jupiter brings a sense of optimism and expands whatever it touches. This void of course moon brings together the moon in Pisces with Jupiter in Cancer, two lovely water signs. So consider spending some time immersed in water, nearby water. If you're not near water, hey, take a bath. This can be an emotionally healing time. Use it to get in the habit of expressing kindness and nourishment to all, and that includes yourself. On Wednesday, August 13th, the moon in Aries trines the sun at 3:54 p.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for 14 hours, 28 minutes, and enters Taurus on August 14th at 6:22 a.m. The sun is still in Leo, where it is at its strongest, and the moon is in Aries, a fellow fire sign. There's kind of a simpatico here between the moon in Aries and the sun in Leo. There is a sense of ease and joy between the luminaries and these two passionate fire signs. I like to use the void of course moon periods to initiate good habits. And I think the opportunity here is to initiate a habit of practicing gratitude just for being alive on the planet, which fire signs celebrate. On Friday, August 15th, the moon in Taurus squares the sun at 10:12 p.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for 10 hours and 49 minutes, then enters Gemini on August 16th at 9:01 a.m. The moon in Taurus and the sun in Leo share an appreciation for the finer things in life, but not everyone has millions of dollars in the bank to spend on fancy trinkets. So this is where the concept of quiet luxury comes onto the scene. I first heard about quiet luxury a couple of years ago on social media. I remember the concept got kind of distorted and there was some drama around it. But basically, quiet luxury is a concept that emphasizes understated elegance, quality craftsmanship, and subtle sophistication over garish displays of trendy and expensive junk. Use this void of course moon to think about ways you can introduce quiet luxury into your life. This can be buying some nice smelling candle from the gift shop in your neighborhood. Drink some beautiful, deliciously blended coffee or tea drink. Or even wash your hands with a sparkly handmade soap. These things don't have to cost a lot of money, but they can send a signal to ourselves that we're treating ourselves, we're doing something nice for a person that we care about, namely ourselves. In this week's listener question, listener Catherine writes, "Hi April, I use the whole sign house system. In my natal chart, I have a 9th house, Taurus, Midheaven. When Uranus started its transit of this sign, it certainly shook up my whole career. I was bored in a once incredibly satisfying and creative job for 22 years. Taurus is very fixed, and I was happy until Uranus shook everything up. I'm now self-employed and very happy, but Uranus has just entered my whole sign 10th house, which has Gemini on the cusp. What more is in store? Will Uranus continue to shake things up in my 10th house of career? Do people with 9th and 11th house midheavens get a double whammy when they get transited? I would love to hear your insights on 9th and 11th whole sign house midheaven signs compared to the 10th house. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for your question, and I am going to answer it as someone who does not work with whole sign houses, but I am somewhat familiar with them. For those who are not familiar with the whole sign house system, in that system, the houses of the chart are derived from the sign of the natural ascendant. So, say your natural ascendant is 3 degrees Virgo. That's still going to show up somewhere in the first house of your whole sign chart. But what we do is take 0 degrees of that ascendant's sign, which is Virgo, place it on the cusp of the first house. Then each successive house has 0 degrees of the next sign on the cusp. In this example, the second house would have 0 degrees Libra on the cusp. The third house would be 0 degrees Scorpio, and so on. When calculated in whole sign houses, planets in your birth chart can end up in pretty different houses than in a chart calculated with, say, Placidus houses. Your ascendant is no longer the cusp of your first house, and your midheaven is no longer the cusp of the 10th house. However, your ascendant will always fall in the whole sign first house, but your midheaven can fall within a house either side of the 10th, so between the 9th and the 11th. This is significant because the midheaven marks the sun's highest point in the sky on that day, and therefore it's closely connected to career, reputation, and calling. Also, in the whole sign house system, when a planet moves into a new sign, it automatically enters a new house because each house begins at 0 degrees of a sign. Now, Uranus entered Taurus in 2018 and immediately entered your 9th house. So it brings a kind of disruptive influence often. Uranus does. It wants to wake you up in the area of your chart that it's moving through. And in this case, it's 9th house territory. It's education and travel, publishing, religion, your view on life. Your midheaven is in the whole sign 9th house. And in this system, we might suspect that your career would eventually be found in a 9th house kind of a field, like education, travel, publishing, or so on. But your midheaven is in pretty late Taurus. It's at 24 degrees. And Uranus, from the time it entered that 9th house in whole signs, did not catch up with the midheaven until midway through 2024, last year. And it had a second conjunction this last spring. So I'm not sure that Uranus entering the 9th house would immediately disrupt your career, just because the midheaven is in that house, because the midheaven's very close to the end of that house. But my feeling is that Uranus would mostly be influencing the ninth house areas of life. And that does seem to go along with your description of feeling bored in your once satisfying job. When Uranus enters the scene, we are ready for something new. And maybe that was about the time that you started to realize you weren't going to be happy in this career forever. And maybe even that it was time for some additional training or maybe certification for your career. From the time Uranus entered Taurus in the middle of May 2018 through 2024. In the whole sign system, your midheaven falls within 6 degrees of the 10th house cusp. So as Uranus entered Gemini and your whole sign 10th house on July 7th, it actually was still in kind of a separating conjunction to your midheaven. Now, as it goes into the 10th house, the Uranian influence on career and reputation probably gears up and intensifies again. So I think you could probably consider this as extending Uranus's influence with your career. But, and I think this is important, it's most likely to have a strong influence if you are still bored in your career, because Uranus hates boredom. And when this happened for you last time, it was a result of, for a certain amount of time, having gotten more and more bored and dissatisfied. The same might be true of someone who has the midheaven late in the whole sign 10th house. And then when Uranus crossed into the whole sign 11th house, there is an extension of that disruptive influence. I talked just briefly about the midheaven in the whole sign 9th house, which you have. The midheaven in the whole sign 10th house is a more conventional placement. That is where the career would be connected to ambition, visibility, and status. And if the midheaven's in the 11th house, you might be drawn to a career that is connected more with groups and networks and an emphasis on long-range goals. So the midheaven in the 10th house tends to be a little bit of a lone wolf in its career. And the midheaven in the 9th house is concerned with the meaning of life, with the really big questions of things. So you can see that each of them would have quite a distinct feeling or influence depending on the house that it's in. But again, this is not a system I work with a lot, so I'm hypothesizing here to a great extent. Catherine, you should feel free to write to me again and let me know what you think of this, how it sets with you. All right. Well, Catherine, I hope that helps, and thank you for the question. And if you, dear listener, have a question you would like me to answer on a future episode, please leave a voicemail of 1 minute or less at speakpipe.com/Big Sky Astrology Podcast. Or you can email me at april@bigskyastrology.com and just be sure to put podcast question in the subject line. Well, that is everything I have on my show sheet, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you for listening to the Big Sky Astrology Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe or follow in your app of choice. Leave a rating or a review. And I hope that you'll help spread the word by telling an astrology-loving friend about the podcast. You can read show notes and full transcripts and leave your comments about each episode at bigskyastropod.com. Thank you so much to everyone who continues to show support for the podcast. It is so appreciated, and especially to you who donated during my last podathon. And I've got another one coming up on Labor Day week that I'm going to be so excited to tell you more about in the weeks to come. On each episode, I am thanking some of my financial donors by name. This week, let's give a Big Sky Astrology podcast shout out to monthly donors Shauna Hickey and Judy Riccardi. Judy and Shauna, thank you so much for listening to the podcast and for supporting the show with your donations. If you would like to support the show and receive access to my bonus video episodes for donors only, please go to bigskyastropod.com and make a contribution of $10 or more. You can make a one-time donation in any amount or become an ongoing monthly contributor. That is it for this episode. Join me again bright and early next Monday. And until then, keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about April Elliott Kent, visit her website, bigskyAstrology.com, where you can sign up for her newsletter, read her thoughtful essays, find out more about her books and classes, or book a personal astrology reading. That's all for today. If you're enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to follow or subscribe to stay current with new episodes. And please leave a rating or review. You can follow Big Sky Astrology on Facebook or Twitter and Big Sky Astrology April on Instagram. Thanks again for being here, and we hope you'll join us next time.